little bit of who we are, about UOW Malaysia KDU first. In fact, UOW started to as a strategic partner with KDU since end of 2018. And KDU itself is already having about 36 years of history in the Malaysian private higher education sector. It's among also the first private education sector that focuses on private education itself. And altogether we have 4 campuses now, 2 in Klang Valley and 2 up north in Penang as well. And with the recent partnership with UOW, therefore it extended the global network of UOW, not just covering Australia and Dubai and Hong Kong, but also in Malaysia now. So with all these connections, literally the students and the faculty members are having a wider scope of expertise to tap on as well. So allow me to introduce you the panelists for today's session. The first is the Treasurer of Malaysian Association of Private Colleges and Universities, or MAPCU, Mr. Shanker Sathivellu, and he is also currently the Deputy Vice Chancellor in UOW Malaysia KDU as well. Mr. Shanker, you would like to say hello to everyone? You need to mute.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you, Dr. Brian, for the introduction, and good morning to everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Shanker. Next, we have the President of National Association of Private Educational Institutions, or NAPEI in short, Associate Professor Dr. Elajsolan Mohan.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes.
Yes, hello, yes. I'd like to welcome all participants to this timely event. So I hope we will have a very fruitful engagement throughout these 1.5 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Elajsolan. So the next panelist that we have will be from the advisory side. So the uniqueness of this particular session is that we do have an advisory support from KPMG in Malaysia. For this session on private higher education, we are glad to have Ms. Chan Siew Mei. Siew Mei?
Hi everyone. So I'm the person from outside looking in. Hope to share some thoughts. Looking forward. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Siew Mei. So allow me to just share with you a bit of the brief for today's session and the context that we are looking at for this morning. So we are looking at the recent coronavirus pandemic, and the recent movement control order seriously has impacted a lot of businesses, especially in the SMEs field. That includes the private higher education institutions as well. So therefore, it is really interesting for us to have both MAPCU as well as NAPEI representative today to talk about the impact that most institutions are facing in the private higher education sector. While the Malaysian government has introduced several economic stimulus packages, in fact, the first stimulus package was announced back on the 27th of February, that worth about 20 billion ringgit by the then interim Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. And 1 month later, the Malaysia Prihatin Economic Stimulus Package was announced by the current Prime Minister, Tan Sri Yassin, that worth about 250 billion ringgit. And about 10 days later, another additional 10 billion ringgit has been announced specifically for SMEs, by our current Prime Minister as well. However, with all these stimulus packages, it's really great for us to really listen to the MAPCU as well as NAPEI representative to look into how these packages is able to assist the private higher education institutions to survive in this particular condition here. So everyone is talking about the new normal now, the new reality. Students behavior has changed, consumer behavior has changed tremendously. Are the private higher education institutions ready to adapt into this new normal condition? Okay, so therefore today's virtual discourse session is really focusing on the current conditions that the private higher education students are facing, and what are the survival tips through business reformulation and remodeling if required. So therefore, it's really important for us to have the advisory panel as well, so that we can see a different perspective from the consultant perspective as well as from the sector expertise perspective as well. Okay, so these are the context of for today's session. It's not specific to any institution per se. It's really much about the industry that we are looking at here. My advice to all the attendees here is to get your questions to be focused on the area and the context that we are looking at for today. Yeah. So the first one that I would like to invite first to provide her view will be Miss Chan Siew Mei from KPMG in Malaysia. Siew Mei, please.
Thank you, Dr. Brian. So the higher education sector in general falls within our hard reset quadrant. Right? The hard reset quadrant essentially means the risk of permanently lowered demand for offering is high, where the pace of recovery back to optimum capacity is slow. So the sector, we feel, may also be experiencing potential struggle to recover from COVID-19 due to perhaps insufficient capital to ride out an extended recession and or poor execution of digital transformation. Let's go through some of those points. So for Malaysian PHEIs, and talking about struggles, staff cost is always the first bucket to be studied. So our research shows that in the main, there is a reasonably tight band within which staff cost is sitting, right, representing the running of an education business in Malaysia. Of course, there will be outliers, positive or negative. With such data being available in general, there is opportunity for institutions to study their cost pool and make the appropriate adjustments. The other area to watch is then the sufficiency of capital and the debt burden. From our restructuring and insolvency experience, we do not yet see the stress levels arising from PHEIs within the financial sector books. So at the moment, we think it's okay. Therefore, we then look at the most important determinant in a reset situation, which is competition. Right? The Ministry of Education's ambition is for Malaysia to be an education hub and for the number of foreign students to double by 2025, triple by 2030, right? With approximately 450 PHEIs in Malaysia, competition for student enrollment and for academic staff is definitely stiff. So under such a landscape, there is scope for industry consolidation. This is our prediction for the future, so to speak. Around the globe, we are in constant talks with all our clients, right? And especially in the UK, where UK universities tend to lose billions if the pandemic keeps foreign students away. Conversations with our clients are on consistent themes, right? Reopening campuses, transforming higher education, assessing the financial implications, managing faculty, staff, and student numbers, and contributing to economic rejuvenation. On a positive note, the impact of foreign students to Malaysia is perhaps more muted as our foreign student numbers constitute, a lower percentage of total enrollments. Well, those are my opening remarks. We can discuss these points further. Over to you, Dr. Brian.
Okay, thanks a lot, Siew Mei. Yeah. Next, we would like to move on to Mr. Shanker from the sector panelist perspective on MAPCU's head.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. On the MAPCU's front, I would like to say that we have been very concerned over the member struggle during this challenging time. What you call pandemic as well as the MCO came in a sudden manner, and what happened is everybody have to swing into action just to meet our deliverables and so on. While we want to achieve our our target of getting students to complete their studies and so on, we are equally challenged with a lot of constraints, all right, such as having to teach online immediately, doing away with without the face-to-face mode and various other constraints. And not all members or institutions have infrastructures to fully go online and so on. So, but we have been a close stakeholder when it comes to discussion on how to handle this situation. We have been represented in various meetings with the Ministry of Higher Education and other agencies so that we can speak on behalf of members in handling this situation. As with this situation of pandemic and having to not being able to open campus for normal teaching, members do struggle because a lot of uncertainties are there, right? How long this situation is going to go on, and how we are going to ensure students graduate on time, or we make sure they reach their learning outcomes, as well as and whatever attributes required. So these are some of those things that we need to look at, and how long can we sustain in this situation is another discussion that is ongoing right now, because different members have different challenges to an extent. Some have big campus with huge overheads, some are small operators, but having at the same time difficulty with online platforms and so on and so forth. So I think it is a situation that we have to look at overall, as well as on the institutional level as well. So just to start off, that would be some of those things that we have to discuss in detail.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shanker. Next, I would like to invite Prof. Elaj, please.
Prof, you're under mute.
Yeah, you need to unmute yourself, yeah, Prof.
Okay, can you hear?
Yes, now okay.
Okay, great. First, I'd like to thank the organizer of the event for inviting NAPEI to share views and experience under this current pandemic situation. And I really agree with what Shanker mentioned just now, because we are from the same industry. The missing point here is, first, the government has to treat the education sector as an industry. Yeah, why? Because we have, we have about 443 private institutions here of higher learning, of which 101 are universities and the remaining 342 are colleges. And we have more than 1.3 million total enrollment in the whole higher education sector, of which 50.3% are from the private sector. So this is to show that the private sector has overtaken the public sector in providing education, which actually is the role of the government. And the amount of investment that is gone is very high. Yeah. So about 50.3% is from the private sector. And we cater for about 75% of the total international student enrollment. So again, all this boils down to revenue. And we have also presented at various forums, even the ministry, that the total contribution towards the GDP from the whole private sector, including the schools and all that, is about 40 over billion. Yeah, about 40 over billion. So it is one of the major industries. So that's the same reason why we want the government to look at private education sector as a whole as an industry, which means that it needs a lot of support. Like if you look at the Minister of Tourism, of course, tourism brings a lot of money in, but you see the amount of support, the financial support the whole industry gets, we don't get anything. Yeah, so these are all have been our problems over the years. And even under the current situation, for the past, even before the COVID, for the past 3 years, most of the private institutions have been running at a loss. Yeah, that's because of some of the policies that do not support, and especially like the international students coming in, a lot of issues we have raised. So these are some of the problems where sometimes not necessarily monetary gain or support, but it is sometimes the policies that do not support the whole education sector. Like now, if you look at the current pandemic situation, like you see, New South Wales has allocated about 20 million for students who are stranded in their hostels and all that. So what are we doing about it? And we are making more problems for the students who are already here. Yeah. Now, on the look at over the last 3 years, about 51 higher institutions have closed down because they're not able to sustain, partly because that is the landscape. The whole national landscape is we have the number of students enrolling after SPM has dropped. As much as 30% of students who finish SPM every year out of the close to 500,000, 30% of them do not enroll anywhere, not even in the TVET or not even in the certificate courses. Where are they? Maybe now they are happy with being Grab drivers or Grab food supply because easy for them because they make more money than doing a diploma. So the national policy, but on the long run, it will have a big impact on the national economy of the country, where you have the socio-economic problems coming in because of lack of educational reforms. Now, we have under the new norms, actually I wouldn't say it's a new norm because there already been a transition where a lot of learning has already been going online already. Yeah, the mixed mode already there, the open universities were there already there. So now this has been extended because of the pandemic. Has been extended to all institutions. So remote and online learning is the new norm. Flexible education and micro credentials, and it's a good thing that MAPCU has recognized the micro credentials. I mean, these are the way forward to enable student teaching and learning, and flexibility in the quality assurance processes. So far, MQA is okay, but then we find that the professional bodies are not in the game yet because they are strictly following their rules and regulations. The teaching and learning flexibility is not there. But at the end of the day, we understand that the learning outcomes are met. How we meet the learning outcomes can be different. That's where the creativity comes in. Yeah. So this is what we are looking at. And we have raised a number of issues with the ministry on how all the different agencies can work together, like the immigration, the KDN, the MQA, and I think the Education Malaysia is trying to come forward to provide some assistance, how we can work together. But again, it's yet to be seen. And what we see is on the impact of the COVID-19 is the private higher institutions in financial distress. I think we have seen earlier because they don't have the cash flow. Yeah. And even if things are good, but then you cannot. And at the same time, we are getting high pressure. Even the last 2 days, they want private institutions to reduce the fees. I think there is no way we can reduce the fees because the cost remains the same. The only saving you have is maybe on the electric bill. And how much electric bill? I think we have given a sample. If you have $30,000 monthly electric bill and you've got 10,000 students, it's only $3 per person. Yeah. So there is no saving. On top of that, we have invested more in the new infrastructure, and a lot of training has gone on to train the academics to be familiar with the new system, so that there is no hitch. Because the end of the day, the learning outcome has to be reached. Now, students on outline mode are not inclined to continue paying the fees. That's why I say they don't want to pay the fees, but they don't understand that end of the day, they will get the award by meeting all the learning outcomes. Yeah, and additional expenditure providing entry of international students. And some countries are already opening, as I mentioned just now. So what about the students in the country already? Are they being helped? Some of them have difficulty in accommodation. There is no initiative at all. So these are some of the issues which we have been facing, and we have highlighted at the ministry. So if things work well, so what you're looking at, although just now we saw all the stimulus packages, the private sector was never included in the stimulus package, except for some of the smaller institutions which come under the SME category. Yeah. So we have met with the Ministry of Economic Affairs. We are putting forward, at least help us in the recovery period. The recovery will take a bit of time. So at least the policies must be more flexible, although the regulations must be more enabling the growth of the sector. So if the recovery policies all are in place, and I think that will be a good way move forward And we hope the private institution will build back, because it's going to save the government billions of ringgit. Because if the private sector closes down, then the government has to take the burden of educating the population. With that, I'll open for questions after this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot, Prof. Yeah. Let me just recap a bit of. Just a second. Yeah, just let me just make sure that the sound is off. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Elajsolan, for your view here. Now, it's a very interesting, right? When we talk about this private higher education sector in this particular scenario now, as both MAPCU and NAPEI's representative have talked about the challenges faced by the private higher education institutions, and I'm also referring to what Prof just mentioned about these. Recovery. Yeah, it takes some time for these private higher education institutions specifically to recover from the current condition, yeah, not so positive condition in the industry itself. And also referring to the latest KPMG's post-MCO reset report, which published in April 2020. Yeah, under this report, there's a diagram that shows that higher education sector falls under the hard reset quadrant. Yeah, perhaps Siew Mei, you can explain to us a bit of what does it mean by higher education is being categorized as the hard reset quadrant here in your report.
Got it. So we measure how fast the effect is. So in a way, the hard reset quadrant is talking about our lower demand permanent. And I think based on what we have spoken within the panelists, yes, hard demand is definitely going to be permanently affected, right? Because students will then take a view as to whether they want to defer their courses, go and do some other things, and take a different route, right? And then we also have already agreed amongst us that the pace of recovery back to the optimum capacity is going to be slow, because there are going to be and in Malaysia especially, I saw a comment in the chat room that at 450 institutions, my view is still there is too many, right? There's so many choices out there. So that's what we meant by the pace of recovery back to optimum level is slow, and therefore that's why we put it into that quadrant. Hope that explains.
I see. Great. So really, this is very, very important, yeah, for private higher education institutions to really take note of that, specifically for MAPCU, I think personally, yeah, and also for NAPEI as well, since you guys are representing the institutions in Malaysia, right? We know that the local market is not big enough to sustain the number of institutions that we have in Malaysia. Yeah. Having said so, Siew Mei also talks about initially, it's a government. It's a Malaysian government dream or strategy to really make Malaysia as the education hub. That's why we see a lot of private sectors popping up in the last 10 years, for example, right? But we also know very clearly the local market isn't that big enough to cater for all these large or even smaller size of institutions in Malaysia. So international market becomes one of the key area where it actually can help these institutions to survive better, right? It's quite similar scenario that you can see in popular education hub around the world, like US, Canada, UK, or even Australia itself. Yeah. So when it comes into this kind of condition, right? Maybe MAPCU, Mr. Shanker, can you probably advise us? Are your members actually getting ready to face this kind of challenges now? If yes, what kind of things have the larger universities prepared themselves, to embrace this kind of condition now?
Okay, we have to look at the situation or the landscape. Some institutions have a huge number of foreign students, so they are relying heavily on the international students as part of their recruitment as well as the student population, whereas there are some others who have a different equation, maybe a lesser dependent on international student and so on. But as you pointed out, the market within Malaysia is quite small for 450 over institutions to share. So therefore, almost all institutions have gone out of Malaysia to get students, international students, of course, in line with the ministry's aspiration to make Malaysia as a hub as well. Some have been very successful. As I said earlier, the population is huge, but nevertheless, almost every institution has that drive to bring international students to the country. Since this pandemic is a global pandemic, I suppose we cannot just say what does Malaysian government do alone would be able to change the situation. All right, because there are restrictions, border crossing restriction, visa restriction, and so on, imposed by other countries as well. For just in the context of Malaysia, the current regulation, of course, requiring international students to get a visa, the process of getting the student pass, visa, and so on, and meeting requirements of visa by, as stipulated by immigration as well as higher education ministry and so on. These are quite rigid and very prescribed regulations intact at this moment. If we want to move forward, I guess, with the new normal, this kind of tight regulation has to be loosened up. For example, if we talk about online deliveries, online teaching, and so on, can we provide the similar service for international students, for example, register, just like how the open learning system being run by the few ODL kind of institution and so on. Can all institutions do delivery of such thing, or do students require visa first before we can do the online delivery for international students while they are overseas? And then comes the recognition. If they do such studies, the recognition at the end of the studies being granted to them and so on. So these are some of those things that we have to sort out or iron out. Besides that, of course, the main focus is to make sure safety, health, and all this comes in, because this is something across the board. Everybody don't want to risk the life of students or the community on campus. But the institutions, especially the bigger institutions who have the facilities, are generally prepared to bring in students. Of course, may have some challenges, but generally most institutions at this stage are prepared and have thought about bringing back students on campus under a controlled environment, meaning the social distancing being implemented, the proper sanitization and all that. So those kind of readiness or preparedness is something that has been thought of after going through the the lockdown or MCO for about 2 over months now. Institutions have started to think of that, because there is a serious need to bring students back on campus. Not everybody can study online, because most of these programs or academic programs that the higher educations run in Malaysia, with the exception to the open learning institutions here, the design of the curriculum or the program requires face-to-face. There are lab sessions, studios. You may have practicals. There's a lot of elements that we cannot just switch to online and make it as effective when it comes to delivery. So at this moment, of course, we have just gone through about 3 months or so. A lot of theoretical subjects is being delivered online, because most institutions have that platform, because we were prepared to do blended learning, or we were already doing blended learning in the past, having the technological backup to do that and so on. But there are practical classes that need to be run. If not, we will not be able to provide the required skills or the learning outcomes for those students for a particular program. So I don't think at this stage we would want to go into curriculum re-engineering or redesigning and so on, because this is still seen as a temporary situation, and we hope the recovery take place. While moving forward, when I say the practical classes can be run, this doesn't mean that we're going to most institutions will switch back to the previous norm. The online teaching has a lot of benefit. I think during this period we have seen some good outcome from teaching online using technology in delivery and in teaching. They being young generations as well, students, some of them do enjoy certain elements of the online learning as well. So I think having said so, we are very eager to get back to the non-online mode as well, while the online is expected to go on. So opening of the campus back and bringing back students on campus is something very important. I think this has been a push by many students as parents as well, because they don't want to have their kids at home and learning from home. The perception of public, especially Malaysian public, is that online is not seen as effective as a face-to-face. I mean, these are based on comments that we get from students, right?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Shanker. Yeah, I think you raised a very interesting point there, specifically when you talk about most institutions, but anyway, whether you like it or not, everybody has to go online teaching now, right? Because of the MCO or the pandemic situation. Yeah, and especially when we talk about international students. Yeah. If the international students cannot be physically, attend classes in Malaysia, then can they actually attend classes back in the home country, online based? Yeah. So it's a question where now the question not just about whether the private higher education institutions are you ready or not. It's also the whole ecosystem. Yeah. Whether even the ministry is ready or not, right, to make this kind of change and exceptional requirement, yeah, whether it's in terms of visa or in terms of whether this particular program is approved for physical delivery, or is it approved for online delivery, right? And a lot of programs are being approved as physical delivery. Can they actually now switch to online delivery instead, for example? Yeah. So all these are very interesting things that we should be looking at, and it's not literally just about private higher education institutions' role or responsibility, but also the whole ecosystem, like I said, yeah, whether the ministry or the other stakeholders are ready to make this change, right?
Yes, you pointed that out correctly. This is currently is on the agenda with various discussions. The Ministry of Higher Education as well as MQA, if you have seen the last month or even immediately after the the online was rolled out, there has been circular out to allow flexibility in terms of delivering of courses, allowing institutions some autonomy to have a different grading system and so on. But of course, when this is being done, it doesn't mean students are shortchanged. All right, the commitment or responsibility of the institutions are quite heavy in making sure while these alternate modes are executed or alternate methods of delivery is being done, the end result should be the same. We cannot have a student at the end graduating with lesser capabilities, attributes, or competence at the end compared to those that we have run in the past. As I said, the challenge was that programs could have been designed to be to be more on a face-to-face prior to this MCO, but the government or the agencies have allowed a bit of flexibility for us to make some changes. This has to be strengthened further, I would say, because when I said in my opening just now, this thing came sudden. Many people have to jump on the boat and just try to get the online thing going, managing students, managing expectations. So many things happened during the first month. I guess that's the time a lot of uncertainty happened, including challenges being faced by the students. Some had struggled to get internet access and so on and so forth, but that has been overcome. Most of this problem, I guess, when we moved into the probably about second month of the online teaching and so on. but there are a lot of things being discussed, being worked on in the back end. As I said earlier, MAPCU has been a key stakeholder in this kind of discussion, including with the policymakers as well at the various government agencies. So the key main associations are involved to see how this can be done. So we expect changes to happen. As I say, it's not going to be a new normal. The government have to loosen up, have to have a new way of how they look at program designs, how they look at program delivery, and including accreditation. Okay. These are things that is being considered at this stage, I believe.
I see. Great. Thanks, Mr. Shanker. Prof. Elajsolan, so earlier on you talked about, private sector of higher education now has already taken over the public sector in terms of students population, right? So we are slightly above 50% of the total populations are now with the private sector. And therefore, the survival of the private sector of higher education is literally very, very important because anything happens to the private sector, if it collapses, that will create a huge problem, right? In terms of whether it's social issue or educational issue itself, yeah? So in line with this particular scenario, Alvin Lu asked a question. As part of risk management for education sector, could you shed some light? What are the stimulus which the panelists, which you have asked, or whether MAPCU or NAPEI, in this case for NAPEI first, has asked and heard from Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Higher Education, so that we can probably be ready on how long we need to persevere. What kind of ask have you done so far from the NAPEI's perspective?
Thank you for those questions. First, I would like to touch on the number of institutions. I think just now one of the panel speakers says this number is still too big, but we must understand at one time we had about 800 over private institutions, and now we have 443 institutions. Now, even among the 443 institutions, not all are active. But some of them are all in the outskirts and rural and all other states, and their numbers are very small, and many of them, whether they're not operating, they are dormant. So in terms of license, what the ministry captures is the number of active licenses. But how many are really operating is a question. Yeah. So if you ask my view, it should be less than 300 which are really active. Yeah, including the 101 over private universities and university colleges. And some of the bigger colleges, when I say having enrollment more than 500, yeah, but many of them have less than 100. Some have got 50 students. So the numbers may look big, but in terms of their contribution, in terms of total number of students, could be less. Yeah, but I think the ministry is looking into how to adjust this, and some of them under the present situation, even over the last 3 months, some of the smaller colleges which had very small number of students enrolled. For example, maybe in January they had about 20 students enrolled for the diploma program. They won't be able to sustain for the next 2 years. So what some have done, they have transferred the students to another bigger college. So this is to cut their losses, to take care of their sustainability and things like that. Now, again, coming back to the student enrollment, we have to increase the student enrollment, both locally and international students as well. Now, locally, what we see is that most of the students who are going to be left out of the whole education system come from the B40 group. Yeah, B40 group, they can't go into the public universities because of because public universities have a limited number of seats available, and also their financial state. To come to private, they need financial support. So we are also putting forward to PTPTN to give them full financial support for the fees, because now they're only a certain percentage. Yeah. So if PTPTN can restructure the loan distribution and give the B40 group not only the tuition fee, full tuition fee, and also maybe some living expenses, so that they are not left out in this equation. Yeah, because if they can make about 1,200, 1,500 when they just can do a Grab delivery in a month, why should they take up the cost? Because also this will contribute to the family income. So if a family has got 4 or 5 children, instead of they coming out with the money to pay for the education, they bring money into the family. But on the long run, it will affect the human capital development of the country, where we will not have enough talent in the country. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why the local enrollment should be increased. If I mentioned just now about 30%, where are they? What need to be done? So it's not necessarily only in the academic side, but also they could be put into the polytechnics or vocational programs. But this is not happening because of, again, financial restrictions from the government. Yeah. So even in fact, in the budget for 2021, we put forward in the budget to have, even for the TVET education, to give whoever is eligible, they should be given the funding to do the TVET education, because currently it's on a quota system. So the depriving students of being enrolled. Now coming to the international market, we have never been a market of choice. Like we talk about Australia, New Zealand, US and UK, students go there by choice. So we, even originally, even before the COVID, we had this difficulty where the student numbers have been dropping because of our own policies. Where other countries, they attract, the pulling factor is very great, but ours, we don't have the pulling factor. In fact, we have put forward all this even for the last 2 years, but I think recently we are working very closely with the JPT, where they're looking into, and they come with the document called the Way Forward. And under the Way Forward document, a lot of initiatives have been taken into consideration. Now is the implementation. Like international students we will be fighting for, allow them to work part-time, because it's not that they don't have, some of them, they have enough money to pay for the first semester or year one, but they need support because we have run out of students from the countries which can afford the money. So we're looking at the third world countries, they like to have an experience learning overseas, but we are not allowing them. So we also said, instead of getting all the foreign workers, in some cases, the illegal workers working in cafeterias and restaurants, we can allow our students, because they are very healthy people, because they go to all the insurance and health checks and everything. And even customers who like to be served by this type of students who can speak well. So even that is not happening. On the KDN, we have also proposed that there should not be any KDN approval, because students coming into the public universities do not need KDN. So why are you imposing KDN for private institutions to bring in the students? As long as they meet the immigration requirements, the EMJS is there, they are qualified, and they can prove the financial support. And if they need to be working, all we control the number of hours, everything, proposals have been given. So there must be the pulling factor. So now we don't have the pulling factor. For example, you can see students from Nepal flying all the way to Australia to study, and Malaysia is just 3 or 4 hours away. Why? Because in Australia, you can do part-time job. That is allowed. So these students, they need some pocket money or to support themselves. So this will give you a very healthy environment. So we need to overcome all this and come with more. If the policies are more facilitative, I think the sustainability of our institutions will not have much difficulty, because we are very innovative. We are innovative, we know how to overcome situations, but the policies are the ones which are hindering. But hopefully with the Way Forward document, I think things will move smoother hereafter.
Okay, great. Thanks, Prof. So from NAPEI side, you have been looking into like PTPTN to restructure the loan. Whether do we still really need the KDN approval? And we also talk about can we allow international students to do part-time jobs? It's really about the pull factor, right? To make Malaysia as an education hub here. What about MAPCU side, Mr. Shanker? Is there any other ask that MAPCU is asking from the ministry side or from the government side besides what the NAPEI has talked about?
Yes, to add on, there's no stimulus package or what do you call any of these big benefits that has been rolled out of the many billions you touched on earlier, right? So the private education sector is just treated like a business to sustain themselves, and with all these restrictions at the same time expected to deliver the outcomes as I also explained earlier. This is it's about time we also have to get some relief, in a sense, like there are a lot of costs that we incur to run what you call private higher education, and also in line with the bringing in students. EMGS fees, for example, there's about 3,000 ringgit to be paid to get visa for students, so those arrangements. So these fees is quite a huge sum, which builds up to when we charge students, when it comes to tuition fees, all the other fees. These are a lot of costs involved. For example, EMGS fees is one of it, which should be considered to be lowered. All right. So these are some of those things. For example, other fees, the bigger fee that we end up paying would be like the MQA's accreditation fee, for example, program application fee. This can run over hundreds of thousands when you have a huge number or a large number of programs being run on campus. The private higher education sector do not get, forget about funding. We don't even get incentives or tax reliefs, for example, for the investment we make on the infrastructure and all of these are huge investments being done. More so moving forward, even at current situation with the online platform, all the digital platform, all this huge investment being made on the technological investments. We should be getting reliefs or incentives or some form of tax relief, or if that is to help institution to sustain and to carry out effective teaching moving forward. So there are a lot of things that can be looked at, re-looked at, I would say, because in the past this is something that we have already requested, but we did not get anything out of it from the government as far as the private sector is concerned. But I think it's about time all these requests for what you call reliefs, incentives, all those things to be put back on table to make sure the sector sustains. Because at this moment, the sustainability is something serious, and we don't know for how long many institutions can cope under this environment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Shanker. Siew Mei, from the advisory perspective, right? So we have been both MAPCU and NAPEI also have indicated that, well, despite there are some stimulus packages for the SMEs, but it may not really benefiting or supporting a lot of private higher education who are larger scale, not under the SME categories here. So there is no specific stimulus package introduced by the Malaysian government yet, as of today. I understand that the Ministry of Finance, the minister himself is saying that there will be a short-term stimulus package they're working on now. They're going to announce soon, and we don't know whether it's going to be relevant to private higher education. And I'm getting some information here. We talk about in other countries, like for example in the United States here, $2 trillion of emergency relief package has been passed back in March, which includes about 14 billion is looking at supporting higher education. And in Australia as well, the government has approved a funding guarantee of 18 billion Aussie dollars for domestic enrollments, and additional 100 million Aussie dollars in regulatory fee relief and deferrals for the private higher education institution sector in Australia. So from the advisory side perspective, if I would ask you to suggest a ballpark figure that the MAPCU or NAPEI can suggest to the ministry to consider to support the sector, what kind of numbers are we looking at, since they are in the hard set quadrant of your report?
Okay, you're asking me for the magic number. Okay, my view is there was a question on when is the economic recovery. So based on my reading of all the financial institutions doing their economic studies, right? The earliest that we can see an uptick in our economic recovery, the earliest is fourth quarter of 2020. 4Q 2020. So I believe, and many of your institutions have got multiple intakes in a year, I believe you will lose the intakes for the second half of 2020. right? I believe a very, very high level basis. So you might lose two intakes, right? You might lose two intakes. That particular two batches will be really tough. After that, it will have a slow uptick there onwards. So I still believe that because there are many financial institutions with scale and therefore have shown very, very profitable numbers in the past, yeah. Unfortunately, this sector is not within the most important sector that the MOF is discussing upon, right? Because there's so many SMEs out there, so many small, sectors out there that require immediate help, right? So like I said, my assessment at the moment is the capital position seems okay, right? So if we have to hold for two big intakes, right, and perhaps at a very lower percentage for another 2 to 4 intakes, right, then we make an assessment as to how long the industry can sustain. If I want to put it out there, you might be in a batch, right, that is going to be considered at a later date, right? And that's my view. So at this current review, you're not probably in that batch. Yeah.
Okay,
great. Hope that doesn't, shock anybody.
Okay. I'm not going to give you a tough time here. Yeah. So let the MAPCU and NAPEI rep to go and calculate the ballpark figure then. Yeah. Based on what you have suggested, that for them to at least to have a cash flow to sustain in the next say 6 months to a year time. Yeah. To before the whole recovery probably can happen for the private higher education sector. Am I right?
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that also, this also leads to another question by C Tan here. Well, in the late 90s, right, we have seen a lot of consolidation in the banking industry. Yeah, and as now as earlier on, you also mentioned that maybe 400 plus numbers of institutions, private higher education institutions that we have in Malaysia now is still too big for you. Even though Prof. Elaj said that probably it's only 300 plus who are actually active now. Do you foresee there's a possibility of consolidation in the private higher education sector as well?
Okay, my view, and also based on our knowledge, right, of the past, is that your institutions are very brand specific. So to say that that's industry consolidation as if we are in the banking institution, that's not likely to happen. But we do see some consolidation in terms of the pooling together of certain schools with regards to a better geographic coverage, right? You want to have a group that says, I operate in Klang Valley, but I also have Ipoh, Penang and JB and certain of the biggest cities, right? That we see and we've already seen, right? So then the other way of consolidation is whoever who do not have the optimum number will have to then make the hard decision whether they want to continue in the play. So I only see those two options, right?
Right.
The smaller ones will be under stress and they may just leave the market.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Also, Prof. Elajsolan just now mentioned that there are smaller colleges where they have very small intake of students. One of the options for them is actually to transfer these students to another college, for example, right?
Sure.
Will you? Yeah. So, do you see this probably will be but maybe it's not a consolidation practice, but more towards a partnership or something like that among the smaller players? Yeah,
I still say that your institutions are very brand specific, right? So if I enrolled in University A and being transferred to University B, eventually people will figure it out, right? So I don't think it's a sustainable solution. It might be for 1 term or 2 terms because of student numbers, but it's definitely not sustainable, right?
Right. Okay, great. Prof. Elaj, there's a question here from Taminder Singh. Given the multiple challenges faced by private higher education institutions, specifically the decline in the traditional school leaver market, what is your view on how private higher education institution can leverage off the draft micro-credential guideline? Probably you have talked about that earlier on, right? So can you just elaborate probably a bit of how this will be one of the vehicles in reinventing for the private higher education institutions to face the new norm?
Yeah, sure. I think if some of them, as I mentioned, they are not enrolling, it could be due to financial constraints or family, they need to support their family. But then we do not want to totally count them out, because on the long run, they may have to have their share of the education. So this is where the micro credentials come in. And now with the new norm of the online learning, if these colleges can reach out to these people, yeah, go get to the MQA and get all the guidelines how you can do micro credentials certified. Then so while even if they're working, they should be able to take up this type of courses, because in fact now all colleges have their platform. They already subscribe to the platform where distance learning can be done. And even if there any hands-on that is needed, even for example culinary, they can do part online, but still they have to come to the kitchen, yeah, which they can do on a weekend. So as long as the learning outcomes of that particular module can be achieved by a mixed mode, because now the MQA is allowing the mixed mode or totally online because of this current situation. But once the whole MCO is lifted, then only those who have registered, like open universities, open learning universities, only they can do, then it's going to be a problem. So we appreciate if we can extend this for good, as long as they can prove that these micro credentials can be verified and done and allow them to do more. So it means all institutions will be able to do courses online, not on a percentage basis. If I'm not mistaken, currently you can do only about 30% on the mixed mode, but if they can allow, because this is the new innovation through this current situation. So sometimes when there is a situation, that's why we come with new ideas and new norms are coming. Because even when the Android phones came and all that, so a lot of learning has become much easier. That means you don't have to, learning does not only take place when you are in class face-to-face, learning can take place anywhere. So that has become a norm, not only because of the current the COVID-19 situation, even a few years back that has become a norm. So it is how the policies by the government, they have to be more flexible as much as possible, friendly to the industry. See, financial support is one thing, but the policies are the ones which are not conducive for businesses in this country. Yeah. So if MQA can allow this type of learning, and as long as the guidelines are already there for micro credentials, as long as they meet those guidelines in meeting the outcomes, there shouldn't be any problem. So based on your question directly, if MQA can extend this open learning for good, then that will be one of the best moves for sustainability of these colleges.
Okay, great. Mr. Shanker, as a rep for MAPCU, right, there is always a debate of whether education should be privatized or not in the first place, right? So of course, when we're talking about privatization of higher education, then we are looking into the requirement of these institutions to be responsible to the shareholders. So profitability is one of the key things, right? So then we always this debate whether private higher education should be looking into making money or rather providing what the true meaning of education is supposed to be. Yeah. So as the rep of MAPCU, do you think that the current COVID-19 situation is creating a situation that all smaller or perhaps some dubious institutions who are really there just to make money are forced to close, and so that the quality of the education can be more can be improved in that sense? There is a question from Sitan as well, specifically to this. What is your thought on that, Mr. Shanker?
Just to clear the air, education business is not really a big money making business. All right, so that's I think something that have to be corrected. Perhaps if you look at 20 years back, maybe yes, you can operate under a very low investment kind of environment. At present situation, the requirements by the regulatory agencies, MQA, for example, the ratio between lecturers to student, the qualification of lecturers, the infrastructure you have to run certain courses. These are very prescribed, and it is very detailed out when the program is being applied and being run, and of course followed by the monitoring. That being said, the investment to run courses, chalk and board, maybe okay, fine, that's a little bit lighter in terms of investment if you run a business course and so on. But if you look at generally broad-based universities who are running many different disciplines, easily the investment cannot be recovered over a short period, right? Because besides the cost, as I said, the private higher education business is treated just like other business without any incentive compared to a public U. It is government funded. You have various support behind, various flexibility. In our case, because we are treated as any other business, the cost of operation is very high. That we pay high tax. We don't get any reliefs on investment being made and so on. All right. So first foremost, it is going to be it is not very profitable. A lot of institutions end up having to merge even in the past, or having to let go the business because they cannot sustain. So the student numbers are very critical in for their survival. That's number one. Number two is the most institutions, big institutions, are able to survive even though they are in the red, because they're being backed up by big investors behind and so on over time. Right. So to sustain the business, it requires really very strong financial support, I would say. Unless the question is very specific, I would be probably able to give some example. But generally, I would say yes, sustainability is going to be a challenge moving forward. Thus, the support from the government, the flexibility from the government is something very, very important and very needful to come in, and it has to be coming in a very fast manner. So as what Siew Mei said just now, we are not in the priority list. That worries. All right, that worries me, because we have to get into that, because we are actually educating a large population. Over 50% of the student population is in the private higher education. Imagine if the institutions, regardless whether big or small, start to suffer. Then they compromise on delivery quality. Eventually, any shut off doesn't mean it's an easy transfer of student from one institution to another. It's a very tedious process and a very cumbersome process, and everyone who's involved will suffer in one way or another, including students. All right, transferring from one institution to another requires, it is different from you just transfer your credit over, that's continuing studies. But if an institution were to close down and pass on the student to another institutions, the cost on student can be very high to do so. So there are a lot of complexity behind if we have institutions starting to close down and student get stranded.
Right. Okay. Siew Mei, I'm going to give you a tough question here. Yeah. But as since both the sector panelists is indicating that education, first of all, is extremely important, right? We've been talking about education as a pillar of an economy itself. Yeah, the future of the nation really depends on how well education is being delivered. Yeah, but I don't think it is being categorized as an essential thing. Yeah, as what we have seen so far. At the same time, as you also said, that probably the focus of the ministry or the government now is more towards the SMEs, which needs much more help as compared to education, private education sector. But again, as what both sector panelists indicated, that if the private higher education sector fails, yeah, and if it collapses, the impact towards the nation can be huge. Yeah, it may not be in terms of economy-wise, but maybe in terms of social-wise, for example. How should we view these sector in that case? Should we, do you think that maybe in that case the government are actually neglected this sector by not seeing the real effect? What if anything bad or not going wrong with this sector?
If you want my views on Malaysian education, there are many reports out there to say that our quality is not what it was before, right? And then we have saying that other third world countries have already surpassed our quality of education in Malaysia. So as a mother, I'm very disappointed, right? So I wouldn't go there. As a ministry or as a government, because of my observation as to the importance of such policies, it may well be secondary, right? It may well be secondary, and the ministry or the government may say private educations, you compete amongst yourself, and that therefore equilibrium, natural equilibrium will sooner or later. Right. I do believe in general we agree that there is excess capacity. Every institution can take more students. That means the capacity has been built for taking more and more people. So in a way, I think we cannot deny to say that there is excess capacity, and therefore there needs to be some sort of re-regulation, right, in terms of getting the right numbers down. So if we were going to look at foreign students making up the differential, right, and I think
Siew Mei, your line is breaking up. Siew Mei, your line is breaking up.
Still here, still using my internet.
Yeah. Can you repeat what you said just now?
Yes, I'm still here. Is this okay?
Yeah. Can you repeat the last few sentences that you've been talking about?
Professor Elaj says that, yeah. So we all agree that excess capacity within our institutions, and therefore there needs to be some rationalization, right, in terms of capacity. Is my voice okay?
It's still a bit choppy, but slowly we can hear. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, this is the office thingy. So I was talking about excess capacity, and then if we are looking to foreign students to make up the differential, I think it's going to be it's a harder climb, right? And we're going for students that are coming from less developed countries than our country. So in a way, yes, there is a business case for it, but yeah, is that really what we want to do, right? So in a way, why I say the education industry in Malaysia actually quite is because you would have noticed the private equity players looking at it in the last 10 years. Yeah, Brian, is my voice okay? Yeah, the private.
It was okay. Go ahead.
Equity, private equity has been looking at this industry for the last at least 10 years, right? So in a way, the private equity attention will not be put onto our private health education system if they were not, attractive in a way. Right. So there must be something in there, and they looked at it. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Right. So the potential is definitely there, right? So it's really how it is being read properly in the right way. And I think a lot of perception has to be changed now about higher education sector specifically. Yeah, in the old days we always talk about education sector is one of the recession-proof sector, right? And obviously now we know that it is not true. Yeah, and also we always thought that private higher education is a making money business. And Mr. Shanker just now also talked about this already, maybe 20 years ago. Yes, now no. Yeah, it's really a myth that people really thought that private higher education is actually making money. Most of this. whether it's true or not, the management will know about it. So I'm going to touch on a bit of the sensitive question here for both MAPCU and NAPEI representative to talk about this. Recently, we have heard a lot of students request, all the way to the Ministry of Law and publicly about the reduction of fees. So this is not a unique case only for the private higher education, but also at the public higher education as well. So they'll be talking about since there's no physical class, the students are not in the university or the colleges to use your facilities. Why should they pay for your resource fee? And why can't the fees be reduced? What are your takes on this, Prof. Elaj first? Prof. Elaj?
He's under mute.
Okay.
I'd like to
yes.
Just to extend on what Mr. Shanker mentioned just now. The whole government has to change their mindset that private education is making money. They feel it's a sin to make money. It is not. If they feel it's a sin to make money, then they must close all the private hospitals. You get it or not? It's a service industry. You know how much money the private hospitals are making? So here we are supplementing and complementing the government's role in providing education for the whole nation. If a university by the government, it will cost more than R1 billion just for operational costs, leave alone the infrastructure costs. So you must see the amount of savings we are doing for the country. So first, the mindset has to change. That and moreover, you are supposed to register institution under a company. And what is the M&A of a company? You have to follow the M&A of a company. You've got a board, you've got a board of directors, you've got investors coming in. So that's it. Because in some countries, it's not a company. You have to have a foundation. Then the foundation guidelines are different, where the government subsidizes the staff salaries, they subsidize for your infrastructure. So that becomes a foundation. So here we are a company, as a company, then it is not a sin to make money. But again, this money made doesn't go into the pocket. You can see the type of institution we had 20 years ago, and today look at the campuses. Some private institute campuses have 800 million to 1 billion. That is the size of the campus we're having. So where did all this money come from? It's all from the returns and we put back. So this is the mindset has to change. So now coming back onto the fees reduction. Now, in fact, I just sent a report. I think yesterday it came out in the Star. Our total cost of education is fixed. Now, it's only a shifting of time. Because if you say the resources like the laboratories and all that, eventually they have to come and do the face-to-face on the laboratory lab work and all that, because otherwise they cannot graduate. So it's only shifting. That doesn't mean if I'm not using it now, doesn't mean that I have to reduce my fees, but investments ought to be made. Because all these investments are based on the returns or the fees we are going to collect from. Because the outcomes have been met. Because if we are going to shortchange the students but not giving the laboratory, then they won't be able to get a job when they graduate. And all these are controlled by the government agencies, the NQA, the professional bodies, they control all the quality. So end of the day, if you see the document of standards document, all the outcomes are spelled out clearly. Now, if you don't meet the outcomes, the student cannot graduate. So if we can produce students under the current system, where end of the day, they get what they have come for, and they can be gainfully employed, or the employable graduates, then there's no issue. Like they were talking to somebody, they're saying, just like asking the JPJ to reduce my road tax fees because 3 months I didn't use my car. You get it now? Or you go to a club membership, I didn't use my club membership for the past 3 months, can you reduce on my club subscription? It is not, because here, end of the day, here the students get, end of the day when they graduate, they get what they want. And the opening I mentioned, even there's a saving, only thing on the utilities, but again, we have invested more money on the online platforms. So who's going to pay for that? And also the lecturers and academics, they have to be trained. Some of them went on online training to support the teaching and learning. New equipment they have to purchase. And if they're working from home, then this staff may have to give the support equipment. So all these are not easy because it is not that they want to, but if some institutions, if they want, they can restructure the payment. They can restructure that, okay, you can pay this later, a one-to-one basis because of my family background, that we got no objections. But end of the day, you can't, because end of the day, you're getting the qualification and we are producing the outcomes so that you can be gainfully employed. Thank you.
I see. Okay, thanks. Mr. Shanker, from MAPCU side, do you have anything to add on to?
Just to add on, the situation we're in is not by choice, right? So everybody got into this. Similar to what the public, the parents, students are facing, the institutions face the same brunt of cost or operation expenditure as well. We cannot stop our fixed costs, for example, having to service our facilities and so on, so because this is a temporary situation. We cannot halt and then start again. So everything goes on. Staff salary goes. If the rental of our facilities are huge, some of this campus is so big. You have the online library facilities you have to give, and so on top of that, there are additional costs during this time and moving forward. All right, which we are not going to pass the cost on students as well. Something like added security. During this MCO period, the campus has to be secure. People coming in has to be screened. This requires additional security measures and also facilities for us to do the monitoring, sanitization, providing, sanitizers. We have to do the disinfection, cleaning on facilities. These are not cheap, all right? And this cost overshadows actually the bit of savings. For example, the electricity during the MCO, even that, if you look at modern buildings now, the campus, the bigger ones, you have your in-house hostels running. So whether you are running at maybe say 30% student occupants or whatever, your chiller still runs. Your certain costs cannot be stopped. It runs. So because we are providing services to a smaller number of students, yet we have to have the back-end machinery running as usual. Probably slightly on a lower scale, but still runs. And as I said earlier, these kind of costs are overshadowed by other costs we are required during this period, because there's a SOP to be adhered to or to be complied when we have such activities on campus.
I see. Okay, great. Due to time constraint, we will take only one more final questions. I know there are a lot of questions being asked in the Q&A as well as the chat box here. But again, due to the time constraint, we will just take one more question here, following the flow of our discussion this morning here. Siew Mei, there's a question here by Danny Ng here. What are the recommended strategies and recovery plan which can support private higher education institutions in Malaysia? I understand that in KPMG also you have a report on some strategies on new, prepare companies for the new reality, right? What are the key recommendations can you suggest to the sector?
Sure. Unfortunately, the cost structure of at higher education institutions are actually mainly fixed, right? Your cost structure is mainly fixed. So the variable nature of the cost is in comparison on the smaller side, right? Whilst we all know what we can do with variable costs, i.e., try to reduce staffing or whatever, it may not give the desired impact because the fixed costs are so huge, right? There are certain modes of restructuring with regards to trying to reduce fixed costs in Malaysia under the Companies Act, but it comes with a stigma that, oh, you're going for a restructuring under the Companies Act. So people may not want to go into that kind of extreme situation and say that this kind of restructuring will help you to reduce your fixed costs going forward, right? For example, restructuring may include restructuring of your rental rates, restructuring of your loans and the likes, right? But like I said, these are quite extreme, and people have to have the stomach, right, to go for that, right? There are fixed costs and anyway, nothing much we can do. So, but if you have the stomach to go for it because you say we want to survive and it is what this is, right? Sure, there will be some avenues to go that route with the banks and your landlord. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Siew Mei, for your thoughts on that. And of course, in a new normal, since both MAPCU and NAPEI's representative have talked about the urgency and the requirement to go online now, yeah, for most private higher education institutions here. So it's not a choice now; it's everybody have to use a blended teaching, yeah, as long as when the government allows face-to-face physical classes to be happening in the institutions, then you will probably see a mixture of online plus offline sessions, right? So the last part here, can Mr. Shanker start with? What is your last advice, or whether to your target audiences here, or your ask to the government if the government is seeing this particular session here? What is your final say?
I would say that a lot of things are still uncertain, all right, because we are hoping things get normalized and students can come back on campus and so on. But even so, how we operate in future would not be the same, all right, because the effect over the last semester or two, say even a loss of student numbers for last 2 semesters, the impact is going to go on for 3 years. For example, a bachelor degree is 3 years and so on. So the way we do things has to be different, and we cannot just discard the technological way of delivering things just after the MCO when everybody's coming back on ground. So it's going to be a new norm. At the same time, we have to look at restructuring of functions and costs and so on within the institutions, as it's not going to be a smooth sail immediately after we get back on campus, because the international market, as I said earlier, will take some time to recover, and there's a lot of constraint that we will be facing. Some are not clear and so on. So my request would be the government agencies should pay some serious attention to our sector. Not saying they are not. As I said earlier, we are involved in some discussion, but greater flexibility, assistance, and all that's supposed to come. There's many things to be done once we get things normalized a little bit and coming back to operation as usual.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Shanker. What about you, Prof. Elaj?
Yeah, I think first thing is that, as I mentioned in the opening, the government must consider the private higher education sector as an industry, because as what mentioned earlier, even the stimulus package was left out because it was not considered as an industry. Yeah, when a lot of all other industries you got about 250 over billion, and there's nothing for the education sector, where 40 billion is a big money to the economy of the country. So first they have to consider the whole education sector as an industry, as a business contributing to the economy of the country. And number two, although we are under the recovery, if there are any funds which can be extended to the private education sector, it will be most welcome, because some of them having cash flow problems and all that. And it is sad if they have to close down because of this. I think it is sad, because some of them have been here for a long time. They've been contributing towards the national education system. And the other thing is all the policies. There must be a very good working relationship in all the agencies involved in the education sector, like the KDN, the immigration, we're talking about the PTPTN, talking about the EMGS. EMGS do a lot of promotion marketing. Now, marketing is all done for international students, all done by individual universities or colleges, where the primary role of EMGS setup was to do the marketing and new strategies, market development. So all countries are going all out to get international students, but we are not doing much, except for individual colleges. Because of their own need, they are going out to get the students. So there must be a very good working relationship within all the interagencies which are responsible for providing education which supports the system. The policies are very important. Most of the time we lose money because of policies. Even like those days we used to say, okay, you what you call delay the process of application. Accrediting a program. The whole thing delayed for another 6 months. I'm lost. Even under the KDN, if I do not renew my KDN license, my whole batch of students gone. So all these are contributing to the loss. We're just a policy. We are not talking about new policies to bring in students. All countries have their policies. We're not talking about bring something new, magic, so that it's going to be a heaven here. No, you just have to follow what other countries are doing. Of course, if students come in, there will be a problem. No country has got with a problem. But if you want the money, then you have to have some enforcement to see how these can be done. These are my words. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Prof. And last word from Siew Mei from the advisory side. What is your suggestion or your last piece of advice to the sector players here?
Sure. Maybe if we take an approach that's more specific with the government conversations, so there will be a pool.
Sorry, Siew Mei, your line is breaking up again.
Right. So they have yeah. I'm so sorry. So sorry. So there will be a group of people who will be having stress with regards to the capital, right? And therefore,
yes,
because they have facilities that are too big, overbuilt, too expensive, whatever. So we group them into one bucket. Then there will be definitely some institutions that have relatively short-term issues with just covering OPEX, right? Operating costs. So the answers to these different batches of people are different. So if we can break them up and say, try to address them separately, maybe that would be more palatable for the government to look at. Yeah, hopefully that was clear.
Excellent. Thanks, Siew Mei. So thank you very much to our three panelists here. Yeah, Mr. Shanker, Prof. Elajsolan, as well as Ms. Chan Siew Mei from KPMG in Malaysia. So those of you who have asked your questions, apologize that we cannot address here due to time constraint. But I would suggest you just to leave me a message of your email so that I will get the panelists to get you some advice on the questions, and then we will contact you via your email. Yeah, you can just send privately to as a host here through the chat box. Yeah, through the chat box, you can send it through a private message here. Yeah, to myself of your email. Yeah, then I will follow up with you separately after the session. So again, this session has been recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, UW Malaysia KDU YouTube channel later. We will send you an email on that. The next session will be on next Wednesday, 10th of June, same time, 11 a.m. to 12:30, same place at WebEx as well. Next week we'll be focusing on healthcare sector. Yeah, for that particular sector, we will be inviting two sector panelists as well. The first one is Dr. Kujit Singh. He's the president of APHM, and also Ms. Norsifia Aziz. She is the group CFO of Ramsay Sime Darby Healthcare. Yeah, and from the KPMG in Malaysia side, we also have an advisory panelist as well. Ms. Lee Yi King will be joining us next week. Yeah, so to register yourself, that's the link there, as well as the QR code. You can just take a shot of that, and I will see you next week. Thank you very much, everyone. Anything, just follow up with us at UW Malaysia KDU. And stay safe and have a good afternoon, everyone. Goodbye. Thanks, panelists. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.